everybody. My name is Flavia Buzo, and I'm a product owner at DCSA. I'm really happy that you chose to join us this Tuesday afternoon for our very first series of DCSA Plus Connect webinars. So, just a couple of ground rules before I jump into the agenda. So, as a neutral organization, there are a number of topics which we're not allowed to discuss, such as freight rates, trade volumes, costs, any sort of commercial strategies, or any other type of information that would normally be considered confidential or that could potentially affect market behavior. So we ask you to please refrain from bringing up any of these topics. So the agenda for today is focused on the arrival notice standard. This is an exclusive preview for all the DCSA Plus partners, where we would like to explain the why, the what, and the when of these standards that is soon to be published by DCSA. Let's also see what this webinar is not about. So this is not going to be a feedback session or a technical briefing on the standards, which means that we will not get into the details of the API itself or of the specific data attributes, but rather I would like to take this time to explain the impact of this standard and how it can help the trade ecosystem. And we would like to dedicate the last 20 minutes of the webinar for a live Q&A. So again, just feel free to post your questions during the presentation. So as a warm-up, maybe good to start with a short introduction about myself. I'm the product owner responsible for the end-to-end documentation at DCSA. And as part of my role, I lead the development of the arrival notice standard. And over the past few years, I've been leading the booking and bill of lading standards as well. But before joining DCSA 3 years ago, I was working at Flexport, which was one of the front runners of digital freight forwarding. And I have been working there for 5 years in various roles, including also managing import and export operations. So let me say that I have experienced the chaos that you're going through firsthand. So digitalizing trade documents, automating trade workflows, this is something that is close to my heart because I have experienced what it means. So let's start with the why. Why are we talking about arrival notices today? Well, arrival notices are one of the key documents in shipping. They are the trigger point for the input-release process, telling the party that is waiting for the cargo at destination, being the consignee or a notified party, a customs broker. It's informing them that the shipper is bound to arrive. And there is important information there. There is information to proceed with the customs clearing, information to pay any outstanding charges, to arrange the pickup, to arrange onward routing. So this is very important information to make sure that the goods arrive at their destination as soon as possible. And today, the majority of arrival notices are sent as PDFs via email. So they clog inboxes, they're difficult to track, they're difficult to monitor, to filter. They require manual intervention to check that they have arrived, to process them, to insert the data in your systems. And they have inconsistent format, not only across carriers, but also across geographies. So what is the result of the status quo? We have arrival notices that are being missed. We have delayed arrival notices, disputes over charges that are caused by late pickup of containers. We have a lot of manual effort across the board, and ultimately we have frustration for BCOs, freight forwarders, solution providers, and also on the carrier side. So when we started off with the standard development process, we conducted over a dozen in-depth interviews, not only with some of our member carriers, but also with other industry stakeholders, ranging from freight forwarders, BCOs, and solution providers involved in the import process to clearly define what is the problem statement and what is the potential value that a standard can bring. And when doing this, we were looking at two sides of the same coin. On the one hand, we have the publishers of the arrival notice, which would typically be the carrier, and the receivers of the arrival notice. So this, again, could be either a freight forwarder or a BCO, for example. And when we look at the publishers, we also try to understand what is the size of the problem. So we have estimated that on average, 400,000 arrival notices are sent per carrier per month. And now assume we have at least 3 containers, or let's say on average, there are 3 containers per arrival notice, per shipment. What our member carriers have estimated is that 5% of these arrival notices have either incorrect or missing contact details, which leads to delays, which leads to customers not being informed early enough to pick up their cargo. And one of the biggest impact is that they then result in containers spending more time in the terminal than they should be. It leads to delays in the repositioning of empty containers. It leads to potential financial disputes from the from the customers, claiming not to have received the arrival notice on time or not at all, which also causes pain and a lot of time spent on the carrier side to resolve these issues. And then if we flip side of the coin, we look at the receiver side. What happens there in most cases is that arrival notices can be missed either because of outdated default contact information that the carrier used to send this document. They end up in spam. They're received by a person who is out of office. They do also receive arrival notices with inconsistent formats, which basically makes automation almost impossible. And we see also the operators on the customer side spending hours uploading the PDFs, reconciling fields between the PDFs and what's in their system, and dealing with a financial impact for storage, detention, and demurrage fees at destination that could have been prevented if these documents were either received earlier or with more specific information. So what can the arrival notice standard improve in this situation? Well, in one sentence, it can dramatically reduce the manual effort required in this process. So with the arrival notice API, we are introducing a structured data model with a push and pull method instead of using email and PDF. So email workflows relying on PDFs. So push and pull means that the carrier can push notifications with notifying the customers that an arrival notice is available, or also push a notification with the entire arrival notice payload included in it. And on the other hand, with the pull model, the customer can retrieve the arrival notices from the carrier system directly. It wasn't an easy task. It has not been an easy task because we're building a global standard that needs to cater to local specifications. Think about including charges as part of the arrival notice, for example, in the US, or firm's code, ID number, MRN number, all sorts of local customs references that are required already as part of the arrival notice standard to kick off the customs clearance process. And in addition to this, the API will also cater to support multiple languages. We know, for example, that in China, in Japan, in Korea, arrival notices are sometimes issued with the local language. So what this means is that with an arrival notice API, you can have consistent and machine-readable information without relying on PDFs. You can also have real-time updates on whenever there is a new arrival notice available, whenever there is a change to the arrival notice, and it makes it easy to be traced. But when you think about the manual effort involved, whenever you receive the arrival notice through the API, you can automatically compare two versions without relying on the carrier highlighting the changes, for example. Or you can also match the information, the data that you receive as part of the arrival notice can be matched in your TMS or ERP system without requiring manual intervention, because the data that you will receive will be in the same format with the same data model from all of the carriers adopting the arrival notice standard. So this is more on the general overview of what changes with the arrival notice standard. Next, I would like to deep dive on what changes for the publishers, the one side of the coin, and for the receivers. So for publishers, it removes ambiguity in terms of whether the customers have received the arrival notice, whether it was sent, and it will therefore also reduce the manual workload and the errors that are currently being faced by the carriers. Also, by using an API, you can truly automate the distribution. You can set up the retry mechanisms with the API, and there is no need for an operator sitting behind the desk to check whether the arrival notice was successfully delivered and retry manually when not. The expectation is also that because the API will reduce manual workload, it will also make the whole process faster and with less errors, which is expected to reduce the detention and demurrage or storage charges disputes linked to late or missing arrival notices. And you have to imagine that to use an API, you would need to be onboarded on the carrier system, you would need to be registered, so there will not be any more reliance on incorrect or generic email addresses that would then bounce back the arrival notice when not available. Now, looking at the receiver side, we see an array of benefits here as well. So first of all, the arrival notice would be received in a standard format, regardless of the carrier. Depending on the region, of course, there will be specificities, as I mentioned earlier, for example, with the customs references or whether it includes charges or it doesn't, but it will be all received in a single format as data payload. It can also be integrated directly in your TMS or EIP system, which means that there will be no more need to manually upload PDFs, either fetched from the carrier website or from your email, from your inbox. And you can track any changes to the arrival notices programmatically. There will be a clear version of the arrival notice, there will be timestamps, everything already in data format. Data format also means that you can compare the content of the arrival notice with the content of the bill of lading in your system automatically. So again, it's all data to data. And we know that some companies at the moment are relying on OCR, so optical character recognition, to read the content inside the PDF and transform it into data, so that this API would eliminate the need to rely on OCRs, which are typically not very precise and require also an operator to double check that the data extracted was correct. It will also reduce manual filtering. So when I remember my days working at Flexport, we would try to set up filters in our inboxes depending on who sent the email, depending on the object of the email itself, to then do some manual filtering. This was also not very precise. It would change every now and again. So the API would also reduce the need for such manual filtering. So all in all, we see some clear benefits here in terms of reducing delays, fewer surprises, and more automation for your own internal process. So let me tell you a bit about who has been involved so far in the development of the arrival notice standard. Of course, we have our member carriers. All of them have joined the early phases of the development process, what we call discovery, design, and alpha review. During these phases, we have interviewed them to understand what is their current process. We have also collected several samples of arrival notices that are being shared today in different geographies, in different languages, for different cases. For example, whether an inland movement is involved or not, whether it's carrier haulage or merchant haulage. So we've really tried to gain a broader understanding of what is the process today. And based on the early interviews, not only with members, but also with the customer side, we've collected a number of problem statements, and we have developed a draft API. So during the alpha review phase, our members and our DCSA Plus partners have been reviewing the alpha API. So these are draft versions of the API, and they've been providing feedback. Based on this feedback, there have been iterative APIs being released just for internal review and for feedback. We now have 2 members of DCSA who are currently participating in the beta validation. We have 1 European member and 1 of the Asian members participating. On the other hand, we also have solution providers, freight forwarders, and BCOs. Some of you are here in the webinar today, who have shown very early and active interest. Since the beginning, we have had a lot of engagement to develop this standard, to co-develop this standard, and really try to solve what are the key issues with the process as it exists today. So I want to show you also what's coming up in terms of the timeline. So starting from the end, we are currently, as I mentioned just now, we are currently in the beta validation and testing phase, which means that 2 carriers are currently implementing the API in their own system, and they're testing that everything is work as intended, everything is work as expected. So we're still receiving feedback in this phase, and we are addressing any critical issues. There has not been any critical issues so far, but we've just entered the beta validation phase. So depending on when the implementation on the carrier side is complete, we will release the arrival notice standard. We currently expect to release the standard by the end of the year. Of course, pending the confirmation from the 2 carriers that the standard is fit for purpose. And if I go back to the beginning of our journey with the arrival notice standard, we started the development at the beginning of the year with the discovery and design phase. We spent about 4 months really delving into the problem itself and gathering feedback. Then the next area was focused on what we call the alpha review phase, to really start developing the API, sharing it with our members, sharing it with our DCSA Plus partners, and really getting the feedback on the nitty-gritty details. For example, should this attribute be 500 characters? Should it be 200? Or should it be a free text field? Should we rather try to standardize some of the properties that can be included? So this was the phase where all the nitty-gritties were defined, and we are now in the beta validation.